I'm sure we'll have a lot of time to discuss these issues because they're very important. So that's why we're here. And now we have to move on and to give the floor, the screen to our colleagues from Australia. And the talk is by Gabriele Garrido, Sasha Wilmoth, Rachel Nordlinger, and Evan Kidd. So they'll talk about what drives actually word order flexibility, please. And by the way, I wanted to say that there was a comment that there's the signer couldn't be seen when the screen is shared. So I hope that we'll be able to fix this issue meanwhile. But I think we'll need to start with the next talk, please.
Wait, I can't show myself. Sasha, are you there? Sasha?
Oh, sorry, I'm on mute. Yes.
But I cannot turn on my video now. I can't see it.
Huh. Maybe I can just start.
Wait. Yeah. No, it's here. Okay.
There you are.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Okay. Hi, Sasha.
Hi. Okay,
Hi.
great.
Okay.
Hi, everyone. So I'm Sasha Wilmoth, and so I'll be presenting today along with Gabriele Garrido, and this is work we've been doing with Rachel Nordlinger and Evan Kidd, who are also joining us online. So we're interested in how the language a person speaks affects language processing during pre-speech planning. That is, how do people plan sentences before they start speaking, and do speakers of different languages have different strategies in this stage? So we'll be discussing factors that might influence word order choice in experimental studies of 2 Australian Indigenous languages, namely Murimpata and Pitjantjatjara. Next slide.
Yeah. Wait. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so before producing speech, speakers prepare a pre-verbal message and they encode it linguistically. And this process happens incrementally. So as soon as information becomes available at one level of processing, it triggers processing at the next level and then at the next, right through to articulation. So production is incremental and it's influenced by the relative accessibility of concepts. So because of this, a number of big questions arise, such as, does the language spoken affect language processing in pre-speech planning? Are there different sentence formulation strategies for different word orders? And are free word order languages processed differently? So to get at these broader questions, we used eye tracking and a picture description task. And these methodologies have been widely used to investigate speech planning in a number of languages. So what happens is participants see sets of objects or events on a computer screen, and they're asked to describe what they see. And while they're describing the scene, their eye movements are recorded as well. And when people describe simple scenes like this, the shifts in their gaze between the different elements are a sensitive index of when different increments of a message are encoded and how they get combined. So that is the timing of the participants' fixations to the agent or patient in a scene like this can tell us quite a lot about how the speaker is planning their sentence. So in this talk, we're specifically going to focus on some key factors that might influence word order choice, specifically the conceptual accessibility of reference. That is, how easy is it to represent potential reference in thought? And in this regard, humanness is an important factor. And we'll explore this with just the production data from our experiments. And then after this, we'll discuss what's going on during the event apprehension stage. So this is that first stage when the gist of a scene is extracted from a visual stimulus and an event representation is constructed. So this is the earliest stage of the language production process before any linguistic encoding happens. And it happens very rapidly, about 400 milliseconds after the picture appears. And this is where we'll get to the eye tracking data. So we've run this experiment in Murimpata and Pitjantjatjara. Murimpata is a non-Pama-Nyungan Southern Daily language. It's head marking, it's polysynthetic, and it has very complex verbal morphology. On the other hand, Pitjantjatjara is a Pama-Nyungan language from the Western Desert Group. It's entirely dependent marking, and we also have ergative case marking on nominals. these two languages are really different from one another, but they've both been described as having syntactically flexible word order. And they're also both very vibrant, and they're spoken as the first language in these communities where they're the main language of everyday life. So we brought the eye tracking equipment to the field. If you're not familiar with it, it's a very simple setup. It's basically a laptop with a bar that sits under the screen, and that bar tracks the speaker's eye movements. So Rachel and Evan conducted the experiment in Waraya in the Northern Territory with 43 native speakers of Murrumbatta, and I conducted the experiment with 49 native speakers of Pitjantjatjara in Pukaja, which is in South Australia. So each participant was shown 141 pictures, including the 48 transitive events that were part of the experiment, and these were interspersed with filler pictures of intransitive events. And all the images depicted concepts that speakers of both languages were familiar with. And by transitive events here, I just mean events with two participants where we expected a transitive sentence in response. So anything that didn't fit that expectation was excluded from the analysis. We also fully crossed participant role with humanness. So we had all the different combinations of human or non-human agents and patients. And we also reversed the images for 50% of the participants to avoid any bias from left or right. So participants were asked to describe these events. Their eye movements were recorded, and then their responses were transcribed in ELAN and checked with native speakers. So that's the methodology. Now I'll present some of the results regarding the word orders we found just in the production data. So in this stimulus, we have a man being bitten by a crocodile. And you can see we've got a range of word orders from different participants in both languages. And you can see the examples here. We've got SVO, SOV, OSV, SV, and so on. And on average, every participant produced about 5 different word orders. So overall, this provides a really rich data set to investigate word order flexibility in these languages, even before we get to the eye tracking data. So we had 10 different word orders found in both languages, and here we've grouped them into agent initial, patient initial, and verb initial orders. The most common one in Murrumbatta, as you can see, is the AVP or SVO order, and in Pitjantjatjara it was APV or SOV, and respectively these made up about half of the responses. Murrumbatta had more verb initial sentences than Pitjantjatjara did. These were quite rare in Pitjantjatjara, but Pitjantjatjara had more agent initial sentences. So overall, we can see there's a lot of variability in both languages. All right, now I'll hand over to Gabriela.
Thank you, Sasha. I'm Gabriela Garrido, and I will present the rest of the findings. So with respect to the ease of representing potential reference in thought, speakers in both languages were sensitive to the different configurations of agent and patient humanness. Speakers of both languages were more likely to produce agent initial sentences if the patient was non-human, and this was regardless of agent humanness. So contrary to expectations that agent initial sentences would be produced with human or more accessible characters, the humanness of patients drives agent initial word order choice. Patient initial sentences were more likely to be produced with human agents and human patients. We found a significant interaction between character combinations, showing that patient initial sentences were used to describe events depicting human agents acting on non-human patients and non-human agents acting on human patients. This is a condition in which speakers of European languages typically produce passive structures. So Murrumbatta and Pitjantjatjara speakers likewise prefer to place prominent and accessible concepts at the beginning of the sentence. Given the sparse data in Pitjantjatjara, we only analyzed verb initial sentences in Murrumbatta and found a significant interaction between character combinations. Verb initial sentences are more likely to be produced with human characters. Well, overall, these results demonstrate that speakers of Murrimpata and Pichinchara use conceptually available information to make structural choices. We next analyzed whether participants' early fixations to characters influenced word order choice. Previous studies have shown that in SVO languages, speakers fixate mostly on the agent before starting to speak. In contrast, speakers of verb initial languages look more evenly across agent and patient before speech onset. So these studies show that the language of the participants exerts an influence on fixation locations during scene inspection and word order choice. So what happens in free word order languages? Well, regarding eye movements, in this talk, we'll only focus on event apprehension. What was fixated during that stage? Remember that this is the earliest stage of the language production planning process. And given our experimental task, the picture description task, processing in this stage has to do with the speaker's general world knowledge and conceptual accessibility of the depicted characters. What we showed you before. So scene category information and associated semantic knowledge become available. The output of this stage is only a preverbal message. It is not linguistic yet, but it shows a representation of what the speaker intends to say, what will be constructed in the next stage. So here we're interested in inspecting the order in which the different characters were fixated and how this affects sentence planning and word order choice. This is a time course of fixations in a subject initial AVP sentence in Murrimpata. On the x-axis, we plot time in milliseconds from picture onset, and on the y-axis, the proportion of fixations. The red line shows fixations to the agent, and the blue line fixations to the patient. Please focus on the first 600 milliseconds, which is that red box. And as you can see, there is a shift of attention between the two characters. The agent is fixated first, followed by fixations to the patient. This is very different from the pattern of fixations in AVP sentences in Dutch and Celtal, for example. So here the black line shows fixations to the agent and the red one fixations to the patient. During this time window, Celtal and Dutch speakers fixated only the agent when planning AVP sentences. The pattern of fixations in Murrimpata shows evidence of relational encoding. This is very interesting because it shows that speakers are encoding information about the two characters very early in time. So these are the first 600 milliseconds after stimulus presentation. In contrast, encoding of relational information occurs during the next stage of speech planning in Celtal, during linguistic encoding. But this is when Celtal speakers plan verb initial sentences. So the pattern of fixations during event apprehension is relatively similar in Murrimpata, plots on the left, and Pichinchara, plots on the right. Speaker's gaze is more evenly distributed across the two characters during this stage when planning agent initial sentences. Okay, so overall, speaker's fixations are distributed across the two characters in this early time window, making semantic associated knowledge available. Murrimpata and Pichinchara speakers encode relational information earlier than speakers of fixed word order languages when formulating agent initial sentences. So this means that speakers of free word order languages encode event action differently at the message conceptual level. Now, these are the time course graphs of formulation of patient initial sentences in Murrimpata on the left and Pichinchara on the right. They are a bit noisy. So what you can see is that the subject character is the initial focus of attention, but there's a rapid shift of gaze towards the patient. Participants were more likely to fixate the patient when planning patient initial sentences during this stage. So these plots show that formulation of patient initial sentences is different from formulation of agent initial sentences. The subject character is the initial focus of attention, but there's a rapid shift of gaze towards the patient, except in PAV sentences in Pichinjara. So there seems to be relational encoding during event apprehension, but to a lesser extent. Fixations to the patient in this early window show an early signature of the word order that will be produced. And to conclude, well, we provide experimental evidence that speakers of Murrimpata and Pichinjara used a wide range of word orders to describe events. This is partly influenced by the humaneness of characters. In particular, the humaneness of patients plays an important role in agent initial sentences. In contrast, human agents were more likely to condition patient initial and verb initial sentences, but in interaction with patient humanness. One likely explanation for these effects concerns similarity-based interference. This is when two entities are similar on a conceptual dimension, humanness in this case. So the potential for interference or processing load increases. To reduce this, speakers have to make structural choices according to the grammatical options available in their language. And this is to avoid adjacent placement of conceptually similar reference. Thus, Murrimpata and Pichinjara speakers are guided by conceptual information in sentence production, but the flexible word order provides a range of options to avoid similarity-based interference. We found differences in fixation patterns during event apprehension. So the uptake of visual information is different if you speak a free word order language. Speakers prioritize encoding relational information in the earliest stage of speech planning. So right after picture onset, speakers encode information about both characters in the event. This is different from what has been found in other languages where relational information is encoded later during linguistic formulation or after speech onset. Now, similar to other languages, we found that the order in which event characters are fixated follows the word order that will be produced. So, formulating sentences in free word order languages requires different planning strategies already at the conceptual level, before linguistic information is planned. If you speak a free word order language, information about who did what to whom, the event, takes precedence in the generation of a pre-verbal message. And this is all that we have to say. So, we would like to thank all the participants in Wareye and Pukacha, and also some of our colleagues who participated in the project. And we would like to thank you for your attention and are looking forward to your questions and comments.
Thank you very much for this exciting talk. So we have time for questions now, and so please raise your hand or write something in the chat. I'm trying to follow that. So far, we have one question. We have again Shiri and Paolo. I don't know who was first, but I would like to ask Alex to unmute them or.
Yep, will do.
Hi, should I go first since I've been unmuted?
Oh, please do.
I saw your head first, so.
Okay, I should let others, you should let others ask before me instead of me asking all the time. So Gabi, thank you for the talk. What I wanted to ask is that you talk about events as having either both of the participants being human, one of them inanimate and one of them human. And I was wondering if there's, so there's a lot of research on word order and how it relates to whether events are reversible or not reversible. And I was wondering whether the human-human events were reversible and the ones that were human and inanimate ones were not reversible? Like, was there such a thing? And do you think that whether some of the results can be explained by basically the reversibility of the events?
Sherry, sorry, what do you mean by reversibility? That the picture was just in reversed order?
So the idea is that some things both agents can do to one another, so they're reversible. So for example, I don't know, the girl chased the boy, it can also be the boy chased the girl. But some events are not reversible. So for example, the man ate the corn, it cannot be that the corn ate the man. And there is some research that shows that word order depends on whether there's the action can be reversible or not reversible between the different participants. And I was wondering whether your human ones were more likely to be reversible versus the human inanimate ones, and whether that could have been, can explain some of the differences in word order.
Gabby, do you want?
Yeah, okay, you can start, Rachel.
We didn't focus on reversibility in designing the experiment, but many of our stimuli were reversible whether they were human or non-human participants. So a lot of our even non-human on non-human events are chasing events, for example. So, one type of animal chasing a different type of animal, they would all be reversible. There's a lot of, and probably most of the human ones are too. So I don't think the issue of reversibility would have played a role in our responses. But Gabby, you might want to add to that.
No, I just wanted to say that we did not use pictures in which, for example, there was a woman chasing the chicken and then the chicken chasing the woman, but all the stimuli was counterbalanced in the number of humans acting on humans or non-humans acting on, humans.
Okay. So you're saying that even with the humans and the inanimates, they were still reversible?
Yes, I think many of them were.
Okay, that sounds nice. Thank you.
Right, okay, Stefan.
Yeah, I don't know if she was also talking about the perspectival predicates that people like Lila Gleitman talk about, such as chasing and fleeing, which is maybe a little bit more relevant to the data than reversibility. I guess any kind of transitive predicate could be reversible when there's two animates or two humans at least.
Sorry, yes, I mean, I was mostly talking about reversibility, but it's true, there are different, there are different other factors that people try to see whether they make a difference, and I just was wondering whether they could have played a part. It sounds that at least the human versus not did not play a part, but I don't know enough of the stimuli to know if there are other, it doesn't sound like this was a confound. I don't know anything about other aspects, whether they do or do not have a confound, but yeah, I mean, I'm not sure. I mean, my question was specifically about reversibility with regards to the human and non-human, but yeah.
We can continue with the other questions. There are two questions, one from Paulo and then from Eva, please.
Okay, should I go with Paulo first then? It's the second hand.
I guess so. Yeah.
All right.
Please.
Thank you. Thank you. Very, very interesting. Almost magic with those different results. I wonder whether you are thinking of working out all these data also with different approaches that sum up with eye tracking data, because for me it was very, very interesting to check what happens after 2000 milliseconds, when in almost all different word orders you have more attention on the patient and than on the agent. And this is quite interesting because it seems that at the very end the attention is perfectly driven to where the speaker wants to drive the listener attention. And I wonder whether this can be true or not. Thank you.
Go.
I expect that. Yeah, we definitely, if we had more time, we would definitely talk more about the analyses that we've done in the subsequent stages. But that's something that we are definitely we have looked at, and we'll hopefully publish on. So yeah, and you're right. It is the case that people's attention is driven by their intentions to speak, and that is certainly what we find in the data.
Okay, and I guess the last question now, because we're kind of running out of time. So, and it's from Eva. Nice to see you.
Yeah, I think these are hugely interesting results. My question is just about variability. How much variability in the eye tracking signal did you find between speakers, and I guess also within speakers? Just briefly.
Gabby or Evan, do you want to respond to that?
Well, variability in the eye tracking. I
Yeah,
don't know, because we're averaging them.
But we look across the whole lot, right? We're not looking at individual eye tracking responses. Is that right?
Yeah, I guess the analyses average across the participants, and then what we account for variability in the models, so that what we're seeing in the data is a fairly good representation for those participants, for those particular word orders that they're producing. So we can be sure that they're fairly, definitely for the A initial word orders, because we have fewer data points for the P initial word orders. Sometimes we're struggling to get our numbers up, but I think we can say that these are the encoding that we're seeing is a good representation of what's happening across the participants that we've tested, across all of the items as well.
Thank you.
All right, then thank you everyone for this exciting discussion. Hope it will continue. And so now we're having a short 1 hour lunch break. I don't know, maybe you can sleep a little bit. And then we'll see each other in an hour. Thank you very much.